Navy, retired after 20 years. BS degree in criminal justice, master's in education, graduate of the FBI National Academy, worked with legislators over 3 years in support of gun carry laws. I'd like you to welcome Rick Ward.
Thank y'all very much for the kind welcome and for those of you who invited me. Actually, I came here, I asked Billy Dunn before, when he first asked me to come here, and Vince Thornton, I said, what should I talk about? And they said, well, anything Second Amendment related. So I came here prepared to speak the Second Amendment, but I don't think myself or anybody else could do a better job of it than has already been done. And I congratulate you for your outstanding knowledge and obviously research that you've done on the Constitution and be able to get that point across to the people and what it really means. Mr. Nichols, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So now I got to wing it. So, y'all hear about that new recruit that went to the police department to try to get a job, and they were interviewing him, kind of grilling him about stuff? Anybody heard that? They asked him, they said, what would you do if you had to arrest your own mother? He said, I'd call for a backup. And if it were me, I'd call for 2 backups on my mother. Well, Doug put a lot of emphasis on history, and I want to, since I'm winging it, I want to put some emphasis on history too. I want to start, we're going to talk about Mississippi gun laws and how they've progressed and so forth. How many of you in here like the old gun laws before the last 5 years? Anybody like that? Good, because we have seriously progressed with our gun laws. And it all started with a guy named Obama, believe it or not. Not that he intended to do that, I'm certain he didn't do that. But that's where it all started, most of our recent gun laws, because somehow it was slipped in on a credit card authorization bill that we would be able to carry guns in state parks, in all federal parks, as long as it wasn't a violation of state law. So it was a violation of state law in Mississippi, so he did that in 2009. So in 2010, our state legislature passed a Senate bill that said it took parks out of the restricted areas for carrying weapons. So that's where it all started from. I don't know who was smart enough to sneak it in that bill to get him to sign it, because he certainly wouldn't have done it knowingly, probably, would be my guess. But at any rate, in 2010, the Mississippi legislature passed a Senate bill that allows us to carry guns in parks. It took that word public parks out of 45.9.101 section paragraph 13. So that's where it all started. Then in 2011, if you had a statewide permit, you could look at that permit, the law on that permit, and it would tell you that there were about 20 places that you still could not carry a weapon. And if you looked at that, you've got to ask yourself the question, why would I even need a permit? My God, if all these places are restricted, why would I even need a permit? So in 2011, House Bill 506 was passed. And under House Bill 506, we got what we call the enhanced carry law. And the enhanced carry law simply says, all these places that we didn't want you to go in before, we didn't want you to do that simply because we consider those as sensitive areas and don't think that anybody absent training should go into one of those areas. So if you're willing to go to 8 hours of training, we're going to open that up to you. We're going to put a sticker on the back of your permit that says you've had this training, and now you can go into all those areas except for 3. Anybody know what those 3 are? Yes, sir.
Courtroom while it's in session.
Okay.
Highway patrol and police department. Or jail, I'm sorry.
Yeah, actually they listed several law enforcement agencies, but I group them into one. You know, it's all law enforcement agencies. But it's courtrooms while there's a judicial proceeding going on. Session is kind of a weird word because session covers a long period of time, like a court might be in session from June to August. But it's a courtroom while there's a judicial proceeding going on. So if you walk down the hall in the courthouse and you look at it and you see a janitor pushing a broom, there's no judicial proceeding going on, you can walk in there. If you see a big guy back there with a big black robe around him and a bunch of lawyers arguing with each other and a bunch of people sitting over there listening, that's probably a judicial proceeding going on. Okay, so that's out of the question. You can't go in there. Next one is any law enforcement facility, whether it be a sheriff's department, highway patrol, jail, it doesn't matter. Any law enforcement facility is excluded. And the third one is, some of you guys might have been to some of these, places of nuisance. Anybody know what a place of nuisance is?
Bar.
No, it's not a bar, not even a strip joint, so some of y'all are okay. With places you've been and frequent. Vince, you go to them, right?
I've never been to one.
How many of y'all believe that? See, you didn't get a hand up, Vince. Well, no, what it is actually, it's a house of prostitution or a drug dealer's house, which is stupid in the first place. Why is that even in the law?
Yeah.
They're both illegal anyway, so if the law enforcement agencies know about them, then why don't they shut them down? That's stupid. But anyway, those are the three places with an enhanced carry permit that you can't carry a weapon. Yes, sir?
I'm sorry, they put that in there because some of the legislators read.
That's, okay, yeah. Yeah. Well, after House Bill 506 was passed, and the next thing came along was House Bill 2. And I was a very, very strong part of House Bill 2. I'll tell you what happened. I was teaching an enhanced carry class, and a lady from Sturgis says, "You seem to know a good bit about the law. Would you be willing to write some proposed changes?" She said, "I'm in an organization called Mississippi for Liberty, and I would like to present it to our board, and if they agree with it, we'd like to get behind it, and either with a legislator or some group, and let's push this through the legislature." So I wrote the changes. I wrote one change that said, take out the word in whole or in part. In whole or in part was written into our state law in 1878. In whole or in part. And that became a real problem from day one, because that put the law enforcement officers and the prosecutors and judges in a position to have to determine what's in whole or in part. And I'm sure y'all have heard, if this were a gun and it was laying right here in the open, then that's considered concealed. Why?
Bottom.
Can't see the other side. Now, how ludicrous is that? You can't see the other side of any inanimate object. So why would they do that? Why? Because they really wanted discretion. In my opinion, they really wanted discretion. So let's go back a little bit further then. Let's go back to the Civil War era, prior to the Civil War. What we had was a whole lot of slaves working for slave owners, right? Slave owners didn't want slaves to have weapons, did they? No blacks could have weapons. I mean, you'd have an uprising. Everybody'd be killed. So blacks were not allowed to have weapons. They weren't even really considered citizens, especially those that had been brought in this country, not natural born. They weren't even considered citizens. And the law actually applied to citizens. All citizens should have the right to keep and bear arms under the state constitution. But they weren't even citizens when they were slaves. But what happened was the blacks were the most oppressed people from day one with regards to guns. And thank y'all for being here. I wish if you could get through to the black people and get them to understand that the blacks have been more oppressed than anybody in this country with weapons from day one. And the reason we have a permit law today is because of blacks. It's not their fault. It's because of the attitude that we had at the time. Blacks don't need guns. They'll start trouble and uprising and kill all of us. Because you might have a plantation of 200 black slaves and then have just a few white people that live there. Look what an uprising. It was an uprising politically after the war because they took over and dominated the legislative system. We didn't elect U.S. senators and representatives at the time. They were appointed by the legislature. We were the first state in the United States to ever have a black person in the Senate and U.S. House, ever. We had the first two because of the way that worked. There's only been 5 in the history of this country. Barack Obama was one. There was another one that he preceded that preceded him in Illinois, and there was one in Massachusetts. There's never been any more. We had the first. But what happened was then we were actually under military control. We were an occupied state by U.S. federal forces, and they took control of this state. And their primary mission was to guard the polls so the blacks wouldn't be killed at the polls. I looked at the voting records in Carroll County one day. There were over 2,000 black registered voters after the Civil War. But then in 1887, we had another problem. 76, we had another problem. We had a presidential election that was tied between a guy named Rutherford B. Hayes and a guy named Tilden. We wanted Tilden. The North wanted Hayes. So a lone delegate was allowed to go to Congress and make a deal in the back room of an all-black hotel called the Wormley Hotel in Washington, D.C. And the deal was, we'll give you your president. We'll untie this vote. We'll give you your president on one condition. You will get all the federal troops out of the South and never again interfere with the South's affairs. How long did that last? Till the Kennedy administration. To the Kennedy administration. But then a few years after that, we had another problem. We had the Black Panther group that was a real threat to the U.S. president and everybody in the whole country. So all this word was put out about all these Saturday night specials. Saturday night specials kills everybody. They're responsible for all the robberies and everything else. Who was the target of that? The blacks were. The whites had Smith & Wessons, Colts, Rugers. What did the blacks have? Clerks, H&R, whatever came up. So they wanted to go out and buy all these weapons with federal money. Give $100 for a $40 H&R. Get it off the street. That's what that was all about. But the blacks don't understand as a whole that they are the most oppressed and should be the biggest fighters for gun rights today. We passed another bill, House Bill 314, in 2014, and what it said was that it was already law that no city or county could make a law that was more stringent than the state law with regards to gun rights. Cities and counties started popping up everywhere with signs on the circuit clerk, chancery clerk buildings, public water works. Everywhere in the world they put up signs. They were actually following the police chiefs and later the sheriffs who were doing that. Because the Police Chiefs Association under Director Ken Winter went out to Biloxi right after House Bill 2 passed and said, we're going to fix this. We don't want everybody carrying a gun like House Bill 2 allows everybody to carry a gun everywhere. We want to fix it, and what we're going to do is we're going to pass out all these signs, we're going to give them to our deputies and our police officers, and we're going to say, go to these businesses and tell them they have a right or responsibility to protect their customers. So put up these signs. Signs do a great job, don't they? I bet the shooter yesterday or other day in in Oregon probably walked right past the sign. Why are all those people dead? Why are the people in Charleston, South Carolina in the church dead? Because I'm sorry?
They couldn't defend themselves.
They couldn't defend themselves. There was nobody there with a gun. NRA says the only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. The more of those places you're going to see, it's just like terrorist attacks. They go for the soft target. They don't go for the hard target. I served on a battleship. They didn't ever come near that battleship. We had 16-inch guns that could fire a Volkswagen 20 miles. They don't come there. They go to the soft targets. If you were going to be a burglar, would you go burglarize this building that had guards all over it and cameras and pit bulls out there in the yard? No. You'd go to the next target over that's softer than that. The one that's got that little bowl out there on the porch that says Pee-wee on it. Not the one that says killer on it, written in blood, and it's a wash tub food bowl. People don't understand and don't use common sense. Back to House Bill 2 for a second. Another thing that I'd propose, other than take out that in whole or in part, was, first of all, define the word concealed. It had never been done in the state of Mississippi, and it had been done in all of our sister states. All of them. I said that one day in a class, and one guy says, I said all the states that surround Mississippi, and one guy says, what about Texas, man? Well, we got a state between there in Texas, I think. But anyway, the next thing, we finally defined the word concealed, and then the next thing we did, there was a line, and this was a key point right here. In 45.9.101, paragraph 18, the last sentence said, do not construe that you may openly carry a weapon. Well, guess what? I went to the Lieutenant Governor's office, the Lieutenant Governor's office, and I sat down with one of their attorneys, and I said, the legislature has no right whatsoever, none whatsoever, to regulate openly carried weapons. He looked at me like he thought I was crazy. I said, have you ever read the Constitution? He was a young lawyer. He said, well, yeah, I've read it. I said, you got a copy of it here? We dug out a copy, and I said, let's read it. It said, every citizen shall have the right to keep and bear arms in defense of his home, his person, and his property. But the legislature may regulate or forbid concealed weapons. What's the key word there? Concealed. The legislature was never, ever given the authority, which is where they get their authority from the state constitution, to regulate openly carried weapons. And we convinced the legislature that at that time, myself and Andy Gibson, and the legislature backed off of it and said, you're right, let's take that line out. And they took it out. If you read paragraph 18 and 45.9.101 now, it doesn't exist as a second sentence anymore. How we got that done was that lady that I was talking about went to one of the tours that the Speaker of the House was going on, and they were asking for input on laws, and she got up and presented the things that I'd given her, and he sat down afterwards by her and said, I want to get a copy of that. I like that. I know I can get it through. I got a young man that's head over Judiciary B named Andy Gibson. We'll get that law through. Well, y'all know how long it takes to get laws through, and I didn't have a whole lot of hope for it, even with that, because politicians don't always tell you the whole truth, do they? Nope. Well, Andy introduced that law on January the 8th, and by March the 4th, the governor had already signed it into law. Yay. Not even 2 months. Not even 2 months. It was unanimous in the Senate, and there were only 8 objections in the House. I'm sad to say those were all black. When we passed House Bill 314, every person that rejected that law was a black Democrat. And so it was voted on party lines. The white Democrats voted in favor of it. That's why I got to tell you, we need to get the black people on board and let them know that they are and always have been the most oppressed people for guns in the history of this country. And the reason we're paying a permit fee right now is because of that. How many of y'all remember the old term? Some of you older folks might remember the old terms of poll tax. We didn't get rid of the poll tax until 1993. It was still on the books till 1993. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled against it. Poll tax came in after the failure of interviewing people. If y'all have seen that Oprah Winfrey show, I've forgotten the name of it, but she's interviewed by the clerk to see if she knows the Constitution, which will determine whether or not she can vote. That's how discretionary it was. Let's see if you can recite the Constitution, then you're allowed to vote. Well, how many of y'all could recite the Constitution? I couldn't. Well, so they didn't get to vote. So later on, they had to come up with a new methodology. And the new methodology was, let's make them pay for it. Blacks ain't got no money. Let's make them pay for it. Let's put in addition to a poll tax, let's put a tax on these guns, gun permits, whether or not they can carry a gun. Let's put a tax on that. I had a school teacher from Heidelberg, a black school principal from Heidelberg went to one of my classes, and I asked him, I said, sir, why can't we get more blacks in these classes, more involved with guns? You know what he said? He said, Rick, we can't afford it. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, if you go to buy a gun, you ought to buy one that you can depend on your life with. So you're talking $500, $600, $700, aren't we? $800. Some of you won't answer because your wives are probably here and she doesn't know what to pay for. Well, you add that then to the cost of the permit, $132 then. Why are we paying the Highway Patrol $32 to do this and then another $100 when we're paying them through taxes? Because that fee would keep the blacks from doing it. So we had $100, $132 for the permit, and then we had another $600, $800 for a gun. And then if you're going to shoot the gun, you got to buy ammo to go out and practice with it, don't you? And then if you're going to go to one of those classes, you got to pay another $100. You got to buy a holster for it. Well, heck, you're all the way up into the $1,000 range, aren't you? And you know, if blacks can't afford it, then they're not going to get into it. We need to totally do away with the permit fee. They dropped it this year. Thank you. They dropped it this year by $20. That's because it's election year. They want to throw a bone at you. And one thing you said about the Constitution, it had nothing to do with hunting. How many of y'all have seen politicians on TV where they walk around and they got that shotgun on their back and they got their old coon dog over here and their kid right there, and you know, and maybe somebody else with them that's probably their pastor or somebody else in their church. So what are they telling us? They're trying to tell us that they're for gun rights, and they're trying to tell us that, you know, they're a part of the church, this is a pastor, and they want to raise kids up right, here's my child, and they're animal lovers, there's my old dog. They probably kicked him on the way out there to get him in front of the camera. But think about that. How misled are we? The Constitution has nothing, as you said, nothing to do with hunting. If they want to show me that they're in favor of gun rights, they need to do what Rick Perry did out in Texas. He came out with a pistol. Not only on his side, he came out with it. And if you look at some of the pictures that's on the internet, you'll see smoke coming from the barrel. He actually fired it in the air. I hope it was blanks, but at any rate, that will tell me that you're in favor of gun rights. Don't go out there in the woods with an orange vest on and an orange hat on and a dog and your pastor and your kid and a shotgun over your shoulder and tell me you're for gun rights. It ain't got nothing to do with it. NRA, I've been a member for NRA many years. That means not real accurate, right? Saw it on your hat, sir. Does that mean not real accurate? Okay.
Not this good.
Don't get me wrong, I'm not an enemy of NRA, but I will say this. It's a political issue to them so much that they won't even have their classes and allow you to shoot on a silhouette target because they were founded for hunting stuff. Can't even use a silhouette target. How stupid is that? I've had that conversation with their chief training officer. So, at any rate, I want to wrap this up and tell you that on your laws, House Bill 314 says if a county or city prevents you from coming into the building based on the fact that you're carrying a gun, that you can file a complaint with them, with the Attorney General's office, and the Attorney General's office will send out an investigator and confirm it. And they will give them a notice that they got 30 days to fix it. And if they don't fix it, you have the right to sue every member of the board who voted for it. The sheriff has control responsibility for security by statute of the courthouse, not the Board of Supervisors, not the judges. The sheriff has responsibility for the security of the courthouse, the prisoners, and the jail by statute. They don't have that authority. A judge is simply in there as a tenant in that building like all the other tenants, circuit clerk, chancery clerk, or tax assessor, or whatever. The sheriff is the guy. But under our statute with enhanced permit, state law, the legislature says there's 3 places I can't carry a gun. That's in a law enforcement facility, a courtroom during judicial proceeding, or a cat house, drug house. I ain't going to those places, but that's the bottom line. And the reason we have open carry is because our Constitution was written in 1890. In 1890, it was considered a cowardly act to carry a concealed weapon. In fact, the state Supreme Court even said that in an 1857 case, that if a man were to kill another one with a concealed weapon, he should immediately be tried for murder, regardless of the circumstances. Everybody in 1890 wore guns. How many of y'all watch cowboy movies? If you don't, you're a communist, and I'm leaving. So. But everybody carried guns, didn't they? They weren't concerned about openly carried guns. They were concerned about concealed guns, that you're going to come into the saloon and shoot up the place. Because there were signs that said you had to check your gun at the counter when you went into saloons. So they didn't want you in there with a concealed one. That was the big deal. So one last thing before I close, we've got to get more law enforcement people on board. How many law enforcement, full-time paid law enforcement do we have in here today? 1. There's our problem. Let me explain this to you. There are 10,320 law enforcement officers certified in the state of Mississippi. 10,320, according to the Board of Law Enforcement Officer Standards and Training. According to the Mississippi Highway Patrol, there's almost 80,000 permit holders. And there's some people carry guns that don't want to get a permit, and they don't have to. Open carry is the law because they don't have the authority to enforce it. Open carry, only concealed carry. It may not be socially acceptable everywhere yet, but that's because people are scared to do it or intimidated to do it. We have got to get law enforcement officers on board. First of all, I find they don't know the law as it applies to gun. Most of them don't know the law. Street level cops especially don't know the law when it comes to what our rights are. So they need to get on board with that, but they also need to understand that they're out there, one deputy, and covering a whole county sometimes, and there's 80,000 gun permit holders in the state of Mississippi, plus you guys as militia. I mean, look at the resources they have to tap into for assistance if they need it. Every time I ride by a car being stopped, with blue lights on, I slow down enough to try to watch and make sure the officer's not in trouble. And if he is, regardless of the circumstances, I'm stopping. I'm going to do everything I can to help. And I know procedures of law enforcement because I was in it for 14 years here, so I know you're talking about a sticky situation approaching a law enforcement officer when he's under those circumstances, but that's something that we need to get together with the law enforcement community and say, look guys, we could be here to help you. And you need to do that. Does anybody have any questions before I leave? You can call me anytime. I give you my phone number. It's a cell number at 601-665-6088. That's 601-665-6088. I'm on the internet under concealedweaponcarry.com, and I'll be glad to answer any questions. Yes, sir.
Could you go over the enhanced or the concealed permit for veterans? I know it changed for disabled veterans.
Yeah, all it simply did was it said that you don't have to go through the enhanced training. If you provide documentation, I think, or even an affidavit that you've had some training.
Do you the permit or the sticker? Or there's no longer a sticker?
No, the sticker is an addition to the permit. There's only one permit, and the sticker is an endorsement on the permit, but you'll get it without having to go through the training. Yes, sir.
Give me that number one more time.
601-665-6088. I've conducted 226 classes since I started, and I have taught over 2,500 people. And I have filed 13 complaints with the Attorney General's office. One was right here in Hattiesburg, one was with the county, one was with the city, and both of them voted up and said, no, we're not going to comply. So what's the next thing? You file a lawsuit against them. I filed a lawsuit against them. Within 2 months, they complied and then paid the attorney fees and investigative costs. I filed a total of 13 complaints. Those two and Jones County were the three that voted up and said we're not going to do it. And they all did it in the end. Right now, I'm pursuing a civil suit against the Pat Harrison Waterway District for the same thing. They can't even carry guns themselves in the park, but they think that we're supposed to go in there and rely on them for our protection. When we're in a car or a camper that's an extension of our home, they've got big signs that says no guns allowed. I've been to their board, I've spoken to them, the board members seem fine. Their attorney's an idiot in my opinion. Yes, sir.
You and I have never met, but I'm Paul Boudreaux, and I spoke with you
Yes, you have.
a few months back.
Sent me a picture one day.
That's right. And I actually did file paperwork with the Attorney General's office with respect to the signs at the Singing River Health System, and they were not in compliance with the law, and they got sent a letter, and I haven't followed up on that yet. And also with the Biloxi Shuckers Stadium, I filed a complaint against them, and that was ruled actually that because the Shuckers, a private entity, leased a public stadium, that they were able to put that in there. And of course, my argument is, well, it's still paid for by the taxpayers. The citizens of Biloxi are on the hook for a $37 million bond.
Well, they said the same thing in Jones County about the multi-purpose center, which is the equivalent of this one in Jones County, but they also had them on their city hall, they had them on their courthouse and all that, and we said, if you want us to agree to drop this lawsuit, you get them off for the multi-purpose center too. Multi-purpose center is where you have the gun shows. My God, you ain't gonna bring guns in there?
Pascagoula, they got a gun show sign, and then for when the fair's there's right next to it, no guns allowed.
Okay, guys, all I can tell you is go and file the complaint. It's simple. Go to the AG's website. Complaints is on the left. Click on it. You can download the instructions and the form. It's not even 5 minutes to fill that form out. It's very easy. Send it in and your work is done. Y'all get on board and do it. I've done it 13 times and I'll continue to do it if I'm somewhere and I see it. Yes, sir.
In relation to the parks that you were talking about earlier, is that only a state park or is it a national park?
Well, national parks were allowed under the Obama administration, as I mentioned before. State parks were taken out of the House Bill, with House Bill 506. However, now city parks, they didn't take it out of the city parks. It's under 45.9, 51, and 53. If you look under there, it'll talk about city parks that can control it under certain occasions, and they are not totally restricted. But as far as state parks go, yeah, they cannot bar you from having. We had to go after them even on the signs at the welcome centers, and we got the signs taken down there. Law enforcement officers have had a mindset that everybody with a gun is a bad guy. And that's what we've got to fix. We've got to let them know we're not bad guys. Matter of fact, I hate to say this, but last year I sat down and I typed in these words on the Google. I typed in law enforcement, deputy, sheriff, police chief, and so on. And then I put arrest, convicted, indicted, jailed, and so forth. Mississippi, in that year, 32 hits came back on law enforcement officers in the state of Mississippi that had been convicted of felony crime, for arrested or indicted on felony crimes in that 1 year. So then I called the highway patrol and I asked the state trooper up there to give me a list of how many people who have a statewide gun permit have ever had their permit removed because of the commission of a crime or any disorderly misconduct. None. There have been 9 revoked for administrative reasons, and you got 10,300 police officers with 32 of them convicted of felony crimes in that 1 year, and you got almost 80,000 gun carriers on the state permits, none ever taken. Now the next thing they might say was, yeah, well, they're not as safe with guns as we are. Well, guess what? In January of this year, 2 friends of mine, one that used to work for me, one that worked with me at the Gaming Commission, were doing a training session up at the casino in Tunica. John Gorman was going to be the guy with a knife attacking Bob Sharp, officer who used to work for me, and he's a retired Special Forces Army guy. John came at Bob. Bob took out the gun. I don't know who was in control of this situation, but Bob had a Glock and he still had a round in the chamber even though his magazine was gone. He fired and killed John in the chest. 1 shot, died within a few minutes. Had 3 kids, had just been promoted to chief investigator that day. 2 weeks later, a police officer from the city of Madison who was living in Flowood with Stephanie Bell Flint's son. If y'all been to Jackson, y'all know who Stephanie Bell Flint is. She used to work for the AG and she's on WLBT as a reporter. Stephanie Bell Flint's son was living with a Madison police officer in Flowood. Police officer went out and got him a new gun that day, was showing it to his roommate, and almost blew his head completely off. He lived, but it was 4 days before he could even squeeze a finger to communicate. Now, that's 2 major accidents by law enforcement agencies that we know of that occurred in 2 weeks. We went back and did the research on the gun permit holders in 3 cases. 3 cases. There was one guy who was singing in the church at Pine Hill Baptist Church on Lakeland Drive, and he went to sit down and his gun went off. Broke a little piece in the concrete about the size of a nickel. No other damage. A guy that I taught was a student at the University of Southern Mississippi. He was getting out of his Jeep down there a couple of years ago, and he fired and shot himself in the leg. He was the only one injured. We had a gun go off at Bass Pro Shop several months ago in Jackson. Those are the only 3 incidences on state record where any person with a gun permit has fired a gun through negligence or accidentally, however you want to call it. It was an unintentional discharge. There's 3 of them. We had 2 in 2 weeks by law enforcement agencies, one that killed a guy and the other one that seriously wounded another. So if law enforcement officers say, we don't like y'all because y'all carry guns, we don't think you're capable, call me, I'll send you the statistics. Thank y'all very much.